Good morning and happy Thanksgiving from Mission Control in Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. At this hour, three crew members aboard a Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft, Chris Williams of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kud-Sverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev, are closing in on the International Space Station for an expected docking at about 6:38 a.m. Central Time, 7:38 a.m. Eastern Time, following their launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan just about 2 hours and 18 minutes ago. The Soyuz closing in very steadily but surely on the International Space Station, now almost 15 kilometers away from the orbital complex. You're looking at a view from an external camera on the Soyuz vehicle, a cross-haired engineering camera that soon will have an engineering overlay showing a bunch of data that will help technicians as well as the crew on board the Soyuz understand the relative distance between the two vehicles, as well as the rate of closure before the link-up occurs to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The journey for Williams, Kudzverchkov, and Mikheyev began from the Baikonur Cosmodrome at 3:27 and 57 seconds a.m. Central Time, 4:27 and 57 seconds a.m. Eastern Time, 2:27 and 57 seconds p.m. at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The Soyuz was launched into an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator as it made its way uphill, a perfect ascent for the vehicle, separating from the third stage of the Soyuz booster about 8 minutes and 46 seconds after liftoff. At that point, the automatic commands were issued to deploy the solar arrays and navigational antennas on the Soyuz, and the two-orbit rendezvous profile began with a series of rendezvous burns, small impulse maneuvers from the Soyuz thrusters to fine-tune its path to the International Space Station. This was the scene at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, again at 3:27 and 57 seconds a.m. Central Time, 2:27 and 57 seconds p.m. Baikonur time, as the Soyuz lifted off, arcing out to the northeast from the launch site in the Central Asian desert. All of the three stages of the Soyuz booster performed perfectly, enabling the Soyuz to reach its intended initial orbital target 8 minutes and 46 seconds after launch. At this hour, flight controllers you see there at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow began to assume control of the flight of the Soyuz to the International Space Station. At the moment, the two vehicles are flying 260 miles over the South Pacific, entering an orbital sunrise, moving now from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. We are about 29 minutes away from the so-called fly-around maneuver. This is the maneuver that will enable the Soyuz, once in the neighborhood of the International Space Station, to execute a 50-degree fly-around of the complex to precisely align its forward docking probe to the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. At that point, there'll be a very brief period, just a few seconds probably, of station keeping to enable that Russian flight control team to assess the alignment of the forward docking probe to the Rassvet module before the automatic command is given to enable final approach and then contact and capture. Once the two vehicles are docked, it basically is a soft dock at that point, where the relative motion between the two vehicles will be allowed to dampen out against one another. The forward docking probe will retract to bring the two docking interfaces flush against one another. A series of hooks will begin to engage on both sides of the docking interface to form a hard mate. That will be followed by leak checks on both sides of the docking interface. First by the Soyuz crew on the Soyuz side of the docking interface, then by the station crew led by their commander Sergei Ryzhikov on the Rosviet module side of the docking interface. With those leak checks having been completed, the crews will proceed to open up the hatches, the Soyuz hatch, as well as the Rosviet hatch, and Williams, Kudzverchkov, and Mikheyev will float inside the International Space Station to be greeted by the station commander Sergei Ryzhikov, his Roscosmos crewmates Alexei Zabritsky and Oleg Platonov, the NASA astronaut crew aboard, that is Mike Fink, Zena Cardman, and Johnny Kim, and Kimiya Yui of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. Parenthetically, Mike Fink is currently celebrating his 500th day in space. This on his fourth flight into space. Fink will become the space station commander on December 7th, a week from Sunday, when he takes over command of the complex from Sergei Ryzhikov. That's just a day before Ryzhikov, Johnny Kim, and Alexei Zabritsky say farewell to the newly arrived station components and the crew of Expedition 74 that will begin in earnest at the time that the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft undocks from the station for a parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. That undocking will bring home Sergei Ryzhikov, Zabritsky, and Johnny Kim after 8 months aboard the International Space Station. There's our first view of the Soyuz MS-28 that launched just 2 hours and 24 minutes ago, currently flying over the South Pacific, steadily closing the distance between itself and the International Space Station.
We are done with the test. We have combined GSO, and we confirm acquisition on the first set of course. Copy.
This conversation that you'll be hearing frequently between the interpreters and the crew on board the Soyuz MS-28 currently involving the activation not only of the Soyuz television system, but once again another test of the Corps' automated rendezvous system on board the Soyuz spacecraft. This basically is the rendezvous system that sends out a radio beacon signal to comparable equipment on the Zvezda service module on the International Space Station's Russian segment, so that comparative navigational data can be loaded onto the Soyuz computers, making sure that it understands its distance from the station and its relative rate of closure. All of the Soyuz systems are operating perfectly, as are the systems on board the International Space Station. Once again, we are less than 10 kilometers separating Soyuz from the station. There will be a series of so-called impulse maneuvers, short bursts of the Soyuz thrusters to further refine its path to the station and enable it to arrive in the neighborhood of the complex to begin a fly-around of the station that's scheduled about 23 minutes from now.
Moscow, range is 11 kilometers and range is 17.4. And we have the ISS in the center of the periscope. Copy.
And once again, confirmation from the flight control team in Korolyov, radioed up to Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, the Soyuz commander. Less than 10 kilometers now separating the two vehicles, closing at a rate of about 17 meters per second. At the time of contact and capture, the actual docking itself, about 42 minutes from now, the Soyuz will have slowed to a very, very slow rate of about 1/10 of a meter per second, just barely nudging itself into the docking port on the Rassvet module of the International Space Station. What you are likely to see also during the final approach is the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft, the cargo ship that arrived at the station recently. This past Monday, it was grappled by the Canadarm2 robotic arm and mechanically detached from its berthing port on the common berthing mechanism on the Earth-facing side of the Unity module of the International Space Station. It is currently attached to the arm in what is called a high hover position. This was done to provide the necessary clearance for the Soyuz spacecraft to dock at the adjacent port at the Rassvet module without any fear of interference between the Soyuz solar arrays and the Cygnus itself. Cygnus will be reattached to that common berthing mechanism on the Earth-facing side of Unity next Monday morning. At that point, all 8 ports for visiting vehicles will be occupied on the International Space Station for the first time in history.
Range is 9 kilometers and range rate is 14.5. We still have the ISS in the center of the periscope. We see the video image. Copy.
And this view of the control panel inside the Soyuz MS-28, showing in the upper left-hand corner that engineering crosshair view that you're familiar with. Once we get that a bit larger, I'll point out a few data points on that screen. But this is the view that Sergei Kud-Sverchkov in the center seat of the descent module of the Soyuz, flanked by Chris Williams to his right and Sergei Mikheyev to his left, are currently viewing. The Soyuz and the station are currently moving from southwest and northeast, 260 miles above the Earth in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, soon to cross the coast of Chile. Harkening back a couple of hours to the launch of the Soyuz from Baikonur, the vehicle was rolled out to its launch pad at Site 31 of the Baikonur Cosmodrome this past Monday, some 2 weeks after the crew actually arrived in Baikonur to begin their final pre-launch training. The Soyuz 2.1A booster was raised hydraulically to its vertical position at the pad, enabling technicians to hook up data lines, electrical lines, and fuel lines. And the entire countdown went off without a hitch, as did the terminal phase of the countdown throughout the course of the early morning hours this morning. Once the Soyuz separated from the third or upper stage of the Soyuz booster and deployed its solar arrays and navigational antennas, this team of flight controllers you're looking at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow took over control of the flight of Soyuz and are in the midst of communicating with the 3 crew members on board the vehicle.
And Moscow range is 7 kilometers and rate inaudible. Copy. Rate 11.7.
The International Space Station has been maneuvered into the orientation for docking. Once again, we are expecting the Soyuz to arrive in what I term the neighborhood of the station in about 17 minutes to begin a 50-degree fly around of the complex. This will enable the Soyuz to precisely align its forward docking probe with the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station, which is today's port of call for the 3 newly arrived crew members. There will be a brief, very brief period of station keeping, allowing that flight control team that you see there in Korolyov to align their data with the alignment of that forward docking probe relative to the Rassvet module docking port before the automatic command is issued for final approach.
Range 5 kilometers and range rate is 9.8.
The Soyuz now reported to be less than 5 kilometers away from the International Space Station on a precise path for an on-time docking at 6:38 a.m. Central Time, 7:38 a.m. Eastern Time. Once the docking is established and we have a hard mate, the crews on either side of the docking interface, Sverchkov, Williams, and Mikheyev on the Soyuz side, and the Expedition 73 crew members on the Rassvet side of the docking interface will be commencing a series of leak checks to ensure that we have an airtight seal before the hatches swing open. That's expected around 8:50 a.m. Central Time, 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time. Once the 3 newly arrived crew members float on board and are greeted by their 73 crewmates, there will be a brief welcoming ceremony, if you will, welcoming remarks for the newly arrived trio. Williams, Sverchkov, and Mikheyev will spend the next 8 months on board the International Space Station, returning to Earth next summer. Sergei Ryzhikov, the current station commander, along with NASA's Johnny Kim and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexei Zabritsky, will have about a 2-week handover before they begin preparations to board the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft on Monday, December 8th, close the hatch, undock. That undocking will mark the official end of Expedition 73 and the beginning of Expedition 74 as they make their way back to a parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan, which will be late on the night of December 8th U.S. time, the morning of December 9th in Kazakhstan. Flying over the heart of Argentina, a view at the top of your screen of the Soyuz spacecraft as it begins the final phase of its rendezvous, a 2-orbit rendezvous to reach the International Space Station. Docking is scheduled about 32.5 minutes from now.
Reached in Moscow at the range of 2.5. Please stand by for the correction at time inaudible. Copy. Current range is 3 kilometers and range rate 2.3. Please monitor the maneuver. Range rate 9.6. And please monitor the maneuver. Depot activation confirmed. Maneuver confirmed.
A good view of the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft as it crosses the border between Uruguay and southern Brazil.
The activation was at
The fourth in a series of so-called impulse burns underway. Again, small firings of the Soyuz thrusters to refine its path for the start of the fly-around of the station about 10 minutes from now.
Burn value is 5.17. Duration is 13.
All of those impulse burns so far have been by the book, no issues. The Soyuz right on course for an on-time docking.
47. Magnitude 5.47. Copy. And the maneuver is in progress now. Copy, and we're monitoring. We can see the maneuver from the station side. Copy. We can see the station on periscope. Combined GSO command in attitude confirmed. Acquisition by course set 1 confirmed. If necessary, I can try to change the AGC mode. Yes, Sergey, please do that for us to get a more clear image. Command for AGC adjustment sent. I think that's sufficient. Copy. Range
Soyuz about to pass 1,000 meters distance between itself and the International Space Station. All of the rendezvous burns have been executed by the book. There's a view from the Soyuz instrument panel of the International Space Station, just about in the crosshairs.
The range of less than 300 meters. We'll do the fly around. And this is page 53. Copy.
That fly around that I mentioned that will begin in just a few minutes is about a 5-minute maneuver to precisely align the forward docking probe on the Soyuz with the Rassvet module. That's the docking port for today for the Soyuz and its 3 crew members on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment. The other Soyuz currently at the station, the MS-27 spacecraft, is attached to the Prishal node module on the space-facing side. Correction, the Prashal node module is attached to the multipurpose laboratory module on the Earth-facing side as well. The Prashal module is the multi-port node module. That's where MS-27 currently resides, and that is the ride home for Sergei Ryzhikov, Johnny Kim, and Alexei Zabritsky 2 weeks, in about 2 weeks on December 8th, when they undock from that module and land on the steppe of Kazakhstan several hours later. We're about 26.5 minutes away from our anticipated docking. The fly around of the station soon to begin, about 6 minutes from now.
DPO retrograde burn confirmed. Copy.
Less than 1,000 meters separating the Soyuz from the station, closing at a rate of 2.7 meters per second. Those values are seen in the lower left-hand corner of this external cross-haired camera view from Soyuz.
DPO is off. The range is 830 meters and range rate inaudible. Copy. DPO activation is confirmed for braking.
A good view through the solar arrays on the International Space Station as the Soyuz completes what is called Impulse 6, another in the series of mid-course correction burns.
Range rate 1.6. Copy.
The two spacecraft about to pass off the northeastern coast of Brazil, moving from southwest to northeast, soon to cross the equator in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, about 3 minutes away from the beginning of the fly-around of the station by the Soyuz.
Can you do context on that?
Range is 500 meters.
The fly around soon to begin will do so at a distance of about 400 meters between Soyuz and the International Space Station, aligning the Soyuz with the Rassvet module on the Earth-facing side of the orbital outpost. And we now have confirmation that the Soyuz has begun its fly around of the station. This is a 50-degree fly around of the International Space Station. This will last about 5.5 minutes or so, aligning the Soyuz with the Rassvet module. 360 meters separating Soyuz from station, closing at a rate of about 0.9 meters per second.
1 meter. Copy.
Once the fly around is complete, there will be a very brief period of station keeping, enabling the flight controllers of the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow to confer, make sure they're happy with the alignment of the forward docking probe on the MS-28 spacecraft before final approach is initiated.
Sergey, our recommendation is to expand display 4.4 and also please monitor the parameters. Copy.
The Soyuz about halfway through its fly around. No issues being reported. The core's automated rendezvous system is holding steady. Good lock with the comparable system at the receiving end on the International Space Station.
Range is 206 meters, range rate 0.3. Copy. SNC on course set 1 is confirmed. Scanning confirmed. Copy. Acquisition confirmed. Copy. Range 223 meters and range rate is 0.2. K-15 confirmed. Final approach confirmed. Copy. We're monitoring the roll maneuver. Copy. The station keeping an approach corridor confirmed. Copy. We're not going to install the diffusing screen. Copy. And we'll activate the periscope lights. We are now preparing S-17 command. Once the headlight is on, we'll go for the reach out final approach command. Moscow, we are ready to send the final approach command, and your go.
And the Russian flight controllers now confirm that the fly around is complete and good. Station keeping has begun. Again, this will be very brief.
Time when the approach command was issued. Copy.
And final approach now underway.
Final approach. And you're now on page 54. Copy. Page 54. And please expand format 44 or display 44. Range 19.
This will be a rather slow ballet in its final phase between the Soyuz and the station. At the time of docking, just a few minutes from now, the Soyuz will be traveling and closing in on the station at a rate of about 1/10 of a meter per second. A good view of the Soyuz crossing the West Sahara.
Range 160, range rate 0.83. Range 140, range rate 0.84, and we're seeing the object at the center of the periscope screen. Copy.
Beautiful close-up view of the Soyuz vehicle flying over Western Africa.
0, range rate 0.55. Copy.
100 meters separating Soyuz from the Rosviet module, closing at about 0.5 of a meter per second.
When you're at the range of less than 47 meters, please monitor the ISS, the packet and internal transfer system parameters, and the range is inaudible. Copy. Range is 80, range rate 0.35.
70 meters in closing. 0.3 of a meter per second is the rate of closure. Everything lined up and looking good.
Range 70 meters, range rate 0.28. Range is 60 and range rate is 0.22, 0.23 correction. Copy.
A good rate of closure reported by the Russian flight controllers in
The
Korolyov.
target is at the center.
About 50 meters separating Soyuz from station.
Range is 50 meters and range rate 0.19.
Range is 47 meters, the 7, the 9, 13, 17, 11. This is on format 44.
And at a distance of 40 meters from the station, the Soyuz docking system has now been activated.
Page.
Shortly after the contact and capture,
Now
the
go
docking probe will be
5.
retracted to bring the two docking interfaces flush against one another, initiating the closure of hooks on both sides of the docking interface to form a hard mate.
Range is 40. Range rate is 116.
The Soyuz 260 miles over the Straits of Gibraltar.
Range is 30 meters. Range rate is 0.14. All right. We are standing by for Baza AR for the antenna to close. Copy.
A great picture of the soon to be arriving Soyuz MS-28, and on the right side of your screen is the Soyuz MS-27, which will be departing the station on December 8th with Johnny Kim, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zabritsky headed for a parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
The antenna is retracted at the range of 25 meters and unintelligible on format 44. The target is in the center of the periscope and the crosshairs are aligned.
Less than 20 meters now separating Soyuz from its destination.
Range is 15 and range rate is 0.12 for final approach.
At the top of your screen is the docking port on the Rassvet module with the crosshair docking target just below it. "13 meters separating Soyuz from station, closing at the expected rate of 1/10 of a meter per second.
Unintelligible is 12. Range rate is probably 0. Unintelligible. All right. On an IPU-1, you have the SS repair mode, the docking and transfer system activation.
We're standing by for contact and capture. Contact and capture.
Contact is confirmed at
Docking confirmed at 6:34 a.m. Central Time, 7:34 a.m. Eastern Time, as the Soyuz and the station flew 260 miles over Slovenia.
Mechanical capture confirmed. Copy.
The Expedition 73 crew has 3 new mouths to feed on this Thanksgiving Day. A flawless rendezvous, and again docking confirmed at 6:34 a.m. Central Time, 7:34 a.m. Eastern Time.
All right, we are standing by for the O2 tank's pressure. The pressure is in tank 1 is 102. In number 2 is 248. Prop 506. Copy. Now on page 57. On page 57, we're sending the R7 command to have the wide angle.
2 Soyuz vehicles side by side on the Earth-facing ports of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. The newly arrived Soyuz MS-28 in the middle of your screen, and in the upper left-hand corner, Soyuz MS-27.
We are closing RPV-1 at 15:36:18, and we have AKG command ready. Right.
15:36:30.
15:36:30.
Запуска контроля.
We sent the command for AKG monitoring,
790.
and pressure is 797. At 15:36:30 is 797. BO is 823, and in the instrumentation compartment is
The Soyuz crew reading off
unintelligible.
technical data to the Russian flight control team in Korolyov. We're waiting for the relative motion to dampen out between the Soyuz and the station before the forward docking probe is retracted to initiate the closing of hooks.
Кречеты, how do you copy? We read you loud and clear.
Показания АКГ приняли.
So, did you write down the numbers? Yes. And monitor how the SSVP internal docking and transfer system commands go through within the next few minutes. Well, the next 5 minutes.
It was a flawless ride
Turning off the
from start to finish. 3 hours and 7 minutes from launch pad in Baikonur
correction. We're
to the International Space Station, where Chris Williams of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kud-Sverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev will spend the next 8 months.
Do you have the electrical connector connected?
And the forward docking probe has retracted. Hooks are now driving to form a hard mate.
Flag. Hooks are open. Gas 17. The 17, the 15. All right, hooks are closed. We confirm the 17 hooks closed. The 15 latch is extended for the 13.
And as you just heard, the Russian flight controllers confirming that hooks are closed at the docking interface between the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft and the Rassvet module, which you see in the center of your screen. Again, in the upper left-hand corner is the soon-to-depart Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft that will bring home Johnny Kim of NASA and Roscosmos cosmonauts Alexei Zabritsky and Sergei Ryzhikov. They will undock on December 8th, U.S. time, headed for a parachute-assisted landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. At the time of undocking, Expedition 73's increment will formally come to an end, and Expedition 74 will begin. But today belongs to Chris Williams, Sergei Kud-Sverchkov, and Sergei Mikheyev, as they executed a flawless trip to the International Space Station, launching from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan at 3:27 a.m. Central Time, 4:27 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 hours and 8 minutes later, arriving at the Rassvet module for a perfect docking. With hooks now closed and a hard mate formed, the crews on both sides of the docking interface will begin leak checks on either side of that docking interface, setting the stage for the hatch opening and the arrival on board of the 3 Soyuz MS-28 crew members. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for the next couple of hours and return on the air at 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time, 8:50 a.m. Central Time for hatch opening coverage and welcoming remarks by the newly arrived Soyuz crew members. Until then, we'll sign off for now. Once again, have a happy Thanksgiving. This is Mission Control Houston.